No, that title is not clickbait. You can actually watch Andor as one full movie. And it's right into the description where you should go if you want to do that, as I've made a full 3-hour cut, which takes about 3 hours and 16 minutes in total, and takes the entire show of Andor, which was 12 hours, so I cut about 9 hours of actual content to create one singular movie. Why I made this? Well, stick around to the video and you'll find out. If you just want to watch the movie, then the link is in the description. Okay, but before we jump in, if you want to like, subscribe or share, then I'd appreciate it. Okay, so let's get into the video. Why I made this cut exactly? Well, it mostly stems from the fact that I really have only one complaint with Andor. I love the show, I love the characters, the acting and the drama, but there is one complaint that I've always had. It's long, but not in a bad way, of course. I like that it's a slow burn. However, I've had this idea that it would really work as a movie, and it would make the rewatchability of the show far superior, as that is my complaint with Andor. It is not a very rewatchable show, which is sad, as it's a very good show. So how I will structure this video exactly? Well, I'll talk about the 3 different acts that I have in my movie, both of them taking about an hour, but I'll mostly talk in depth about Act 1, as I don't want to really spoil many of the very well constructed cuts that I have in Act 2 and Act 3, and I'll tell you the generic basis of what those acts take place in and what episodes do they take place in. Okay, so let's get into Act 1, which is the first 6 episodes, starting with the first 3 episodes, the first arc on pharynx. So how does it open? Well, it opens exactly the same as the show. You have the Andor theme, which, by the way, the music I've kept the same throughout the entire cut. The only thing that I add that is Star Warsy is the classic Star Wars swipes, the linear swipes throughout shots, as well as the end credits music is actually the Rogue One music, because the end credits are really the only time where I think Star Wars music works, as I tried to add John Williams' tracks to other scenes in the show, and that just didn't really fit with the vibe and the aesthetic of the show. John Williams should remain in more Star Warsy Star Wars. For example, Obi-Wan Kenobi, my cut of Obi-Wan Kenobi, which I also made. I might make a video if you want about that. I added Star Wars music into that as it felt more natural, but here it just doesn't feel natural. Okay, anyway, continuing. So Act 1, how does it begin? Well, as I said, the entire intro is the same, and then Andor walks on Morlana, and the first thing you will notice is I cut a lot of things that just make the plot go faster. The pacing is just far more faster in my... See, cuts like this are added to simply move the plot further and get our characters from point A to B as fast as possible, as I really wanted this movie to have a fast pacing like every Star Wars movie. Well, most at least, because some go just a bit too fast, don't they, J.J. Abrams? Anyway, I just wanted this movie to be very well paced. Alright, so as I said, Andor of course goes to the club, he talks to the waitress, he tells that he's from Canary, and then of course the plot moves forward. The murder occurs, and then Andor is on pharynx. He talks of course to Bruno. I just immediately cut from him running to talking to Bruno. Well, not to Bruno, first to Bimo, then to Bruno. Then, of course, we cut back to the corpo, and I cut out the first scene, and I just leave the second scene where they find the ship and they track it. As the second scene establishes very well that Cyril is a person that really cares about his job and tries to be a great leader but fails at it, and I don't think I need 3 scenes to establish that. This scene alone establishes that. Okay, then we have, of course, Bix's introduction, and we get a mention of Luthen and how he will most likely come and meet to Andor. This is clearly just setup, and I only have this one scene to set up Luthen, as I don't need any more, as Luthen will arrive in about 5 minutes in this cut and not in 2 episodes. See, things like this I am able to cut, as when you have a TV show, you need these scenes to establish certain things. You need the reoccurrence of certain informations. But when you're making a movie, you really don't need to, as the audience will watch that in one go. They won't separate this into parts. So I can just, for example, have one scene establish that Luthen is coming and he will want to buy something from Andor, instead of having that information just repeated throughout an hour or so. Okay, so the corpo, of course, after sends out a bulletin, and then we have Marfa's introduction. It perfectly blends together. And then, of course, we have the corpo getting message from Tim, as I have, of course, one scene with Tim, of course, giving out Cassian. I really removed all that stuff between Tim and Bix, as that is only teased that in my cut and then later confirmed by Marva in Act 2, as it isn't necessary. It isn't necessary that Biggs really has this romantic relationship. I cut out Tim's death as well, as those things aren't necessary. This is Cassian's story and this is Cassian's movie. So when it comes to different plot lines, Cassian will get the most attention, as I believe that is really the most important plot line in the entirety of the movie. And then in second, of course, it will be Luthen, but I will get into that more in Act 1. Okay, so Luthen arrives and he talks to Biggs about meeting Andor. Then I originally had a scene with Andor buying himself transport, but I had to remove the scene as then the pacing wasn't really too good and the scene really didn't add anything. And then of course the corpos are coming and we have a speech scene which is cut heavily, as originally it was 9 minutes long. I cut it to about 3 minutes long, and I just have a bit of Cyril's speech just to show that he really isn't a combative leader, which sets up his failure to come. Then Luthen talks to Biggs and goes to Andor. The corpos of course arrive, then Marva gets captured by the corpos, Andor talks to Luthen, which I keep in its entirety, and then we have the town, you know, banging on the metal, of course. God, that sounds so bad out of context, but that is literally what they do. I have those scenes to show how the town is really a community, which will be paid off, of course, in Act 3 when they rage upon the Empire after Marva's epilogue. But more on that later. So then, of course, the town, you know, goes mental, and then we have the speeder trick, which I cut to right like this. As you can see, that just gets the point across far easier and moves the plot far more further. I don't really need Cyril and Andor interacting, as that really isn't that important. And then Andor and Luthen escape, and when you have, you know, the big flashy scene at the end of episode 3, this is how I end that scene. You see, right like that, we are in episode 4 of the show. So how did exactly I tackle the Aldhani arc, you may ask? Well, this was the most difficult arc to tackle, as I did a clever thing and I removed the entire heist. Now you might say, why? That is such an amazing action scene. It's so good. Why would you ever cut out the Aldhani heist? Well, here's the thing. As much as I love that arc too, you really don't miss out a lot if you remove the action, as we already get a big giant action in my Act 2 through the prison, as I believe that the prison arc is far more important for Cassian's character. So how did I exactly cut this Aldhani arc, you might ask? Well, this is how. Luthen and Andor firstly, of course, talks, and then Luthen tells him about the rebellion. Andor is like, yeah, well, no, but then Luthen says, I'll give you money, so then Andor, of course, go. Then we cut immediately to the introduction of the ISB through Jedra. I cut out that entire scene of the ISB being on pharynx and on Morlana. On pharynx they are, yes, but on Morlana not really, as that really isn't necessary. You can just imply, it is implied storytelling that Cyril basically just got kicked out, and it makes sense because he failed at his job, and from what we know in the Empire, we know that they really don't care about people who fail. Okay, so we get Dedra's introduction. After that, Andor meets Val. This scene is cut a bit, mostly because the original scene was again like 8 minutes long, which isn't bad. I mean, I just got the main information that you need to understand the plot from Val and Luthen. Then we get a scene of Luthen going to Coruscant, and we get one of our only scenes with Mon Mothma. And you might say, what? But she's such a pivotal part of the show. Well, actually, you can remove her entirely and you don't really lose much. This entire scene tells us a lot about Mon Mothma. She is the founder of Luthen. Okay, that's all we need. So we cut away to Andor meeting the crew, and then we have, of course, Cyril going to Coruscant. Then Dedra tries to go higher in ranks, and she talks to the other ISB agent. This is of course important, as later it gets paid off in Act 2. Moving on, we get the introduction of Nemik. This is the only character from the Aldhani heist that you really need for this story, as he shows of course the ideology of the rebellion to Cassian, and of course it gets later paid off through his manifesto. Okay, so after Nemik describes the two different Starpaths units to Andor and how they differ and how they represent the political systems, we cut on ISB on pharynx. This is to set up how the ISB is of course ruining the pharynx and the Empire in general, and then we cut immediately to Nemik being operated. Why? Well, because why do we really need to see the heist? The important thing is Andor leaves at the end of this heist. In the original episode, he leaves as he sees that the rebellion is nothing good and he just wants to get out of there. So his mindset really doesn't change from the start of the heist. Hence, I just decided to really cut the heist and just, imply that yes, Andor got his money. He of course kills the other guy as well in this cut. I keep their entire conversation is kept, and he gets the manifesto. And then we have of course Luthen laughing, as Luthen is laughing we get our last Mon Mothma scene, which is her talking to Luthen about the heist and the implications. And then Cassian comes to Pharynx, and we end Act 1. And then of course we go with the original episode 7 of the show, but in my cut that is Act 2. And I of course go into all the prison stuff and Nyamos, and of course then it all ends on Marva's eulogy and Cassian saving Biggs as the fighting rowels in Pharynx, and Cassian joins Luthen. It all ends the same, and it all leads to one thing. But I really had to just cut that Aldhani heist, so that it takes a lot of time, and it isn't that necessary. So what is Act 2 like? Well, as I've said, it focuses a lot on the prison stuff, as Act 2 is about Cassian understanding the rebellion and why it is needed. Because I use Act 1 as a thing that Cassian really cares about, only about himself, and that is what he is told actually by Biggs in Act 2. After the entirety of Aldhani heist, yes, he of course went to Aldhani heist, so he knows what happens to the rebellion, hence he just wants to leave. But we don't need to be shown that, as we can use our minds to think what happened, and we see Nemik's body, so we can imply that, yeah, it went wrong even though they just succeeded. That's why it makes sense that Andor wouldn't be wondrous at a risk of losing his life. So then Act 2 is about how Andor cannot stay in this apathetic state of mind, as he will fail because he gets captured and sentenced to a 6-year sentence in Narkina 5. Therefore, he uses Kino to inspire others and inspire rebellion, just like his mother does later. And this all just implements itself very nicely, and Kino's arc is kept exactly like it is in the show. Of course, I cut certain scenes, but Kino's arc as a whole stayed the same, and the entire breakout of the prison is kept the same. That is one of the few sequences in the entire show which I do not cut. But then, what did I do with Luthen in Act 2? Well, what I have with him is only really a couple of scenes, as he is not the main priority. I of course have him talking to Mon Mothma again about the heist, and then I have Luthen talking about how he needs to find Andor, of course, and then I have Luthen talking to his ISB spy, because in Act 2 really Luthen doesn't do anything. He mostly tells us that he really wants to find Andor and kill him, and he has a contact from the ISB, which is later talked about in Act 3 when he has 2 scenes with Saw Gerrera, which I kept. But the scene with the contact and his speech, of course, stay in Act 2, and they actually end Act 2. And the entire thing with Krieger and the ISB is kept in. It is trimmed, of course, but the ISB basically thought that Krieger is Luthen, and therefore Krieger gets sacrificed in Act 3, which we, of course, never see in the show itself. Therefore, we don't see that in the cut, but we get the conversations between Saw and Luthen in Act 3, and Act 3 in general. It is really just Cassian's return to Pharynx, plus of course the ending of the Krieger arc, culminating in all of the characters reaching Pharynx. Even Cyril, if his plotline basically isn't existent, as after the Pharynx stuff he gets one scene where he finds out that Cassian might go to the funeral, which makes sense, as in my cut, Cyril is just a character that really wanted to do his job well. He failed, so he got kicked out, went to Coruscant, and then on Coruscant he found out he got a second chance. So okay, he went there, he went to Pharynx, and he saved Dedra. Of course, I don't have the romantic feelings here, and that scene but even without those feelings established, the scene of him saving Dedra makes sense. He just wanted to save an Imperial higher up, so it all makes sense. Why he saved her and why he did it makes sense with his character in this cut. Okay, and then we of course have Cassian saving Biggs, which is set up, of course, in Act 1. Biggs told him that he's selfish and he doesn't care about anyone. He proves her wrong here, and of course he joins Luthen, and the main Star Wars theme plays as the credits roll. So that is my cut, and this is the basic gist of Act 2 and 3. Act 1 I covered more in-depthly, as it is of course the most important arc, and I just wanted to give you the sense how paced the show is, and how I think it is very well constructed. My friend Tim LML Jedi actually supported me on this project and helped me a bit with the pacing. He told me about certain scenes that I could potentially cut and things like that, and yeah, I really enjoy this stuff. I enjoy making cuts of movies. I actually made my own Kenobi cut. I might make a video about that if this video does well. And if you guys want that, and if you guys enjoy the Andor cut, and I hope you check it out and really enjoy it, I'll catch you guys later. This is a longer video than usual because I just feel really passionate about this topic, and I love making edits of movies. Okay, so I'll catch you guys later. Bye, and yeah, hope you have fun.